Nick, it's really good to see you. We are digging into the headlines today with 3 ways the debt ceiling showdown could affect your
Right.
finances. U.S. debt hit a record high recently, $31 trillion. I don't like to
Yes, it
look at
did.
this because it gives me so much anxiety.
It's
So now
awful.
Congress will have to vote whether to raise the debt limit again, fueling fears of default, which could have enormous consequences on the U.S. economy and our finances. So let's talk this through. What is the debt ceiling?
Well, so you have this debt clock up there, and this is at our live events. We will run this, and
Hmm.
people will just get nauseous because they'll see
Yes.
this. And when you put it in a frame of reference, that just like a year and a half ago, we were at like 28 trillion, and you start seeing that, people will start asking, well, what comes after a trillion? And so the debt ceiling is one of those things when you throw the word out, it's, oh, well, that doesn't sound good, but I don't know what it is. And it really, to put it into how we understand things, it's the limit for how much debt the federal government can have at any one point in time. Look at it as when you get a house and credit cards, they're tracking how much debt you have. And then they're saying, well, if you want to go out and say, I want a $1 million house, they might come out and say, well, you shouldn't have more than 500,000 because anything over that, you probably couldn't pay it. So we're not going to loan you that amount. So we're going to set your debt ceiling here. And what the government's almost doing is they have reached their debt ceiling.
Hmm.
And now they're saying, I want more. In which case, I wish I could do that, right? And Americans probably wish they could do that too.
Absolutely.
But this is kind of an issue. So, and then what we start seeing is we start seeing weird things. Like when the government can't pay for things, or when they say we reach this debt ceiling, they've already made all these obligations already. And then what ends up happening is they're saying, well, we made all these obligations and now we can't pay them. And so what ends up happening is you see these tweets like this guy who apparently the government decided they weren't going to mow the grass. So this guy went out to the Washington, D.C. and decided he was going to mow the grass of some of the monuments for the government since the government couldn't afford to do it themselves. And we've seen this before. We had the debt ceiling crisis of 2011.
Hmm.
So we've seen this type of thing happen in the past, and that one didn't end well.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because we do want to talk about that for context. It was back in 2011, the last time
Right.
Congress had a close call. And that was when the federal debt was at $14 trillion. Before defaulting, though, Congress did reach a deal, but not before the market dropped 14% in 4 weeks. So should somebody consider leaving the market now ahead of that volatility?
Well, and like I said, that was the debt ceiling crisis of 2011. And what ended up happening is they came to an agreement on like July 31st that they were going to raise the debt ceiling, but the damage really had already been done because the argument started in January of that year. And so come August, the Standard & Poor's decided that they were going to, it was August 5th of 2011, the S&P downgrades the U.S. Treasury debt. And then we remember what happened to the stock market. It just went like that. And so there is going to be periods like we're seeing right now of uncertainty. And so that's normal, no matter whether it's debt ceiling or whether it's inflation or interest rates. You just don't want to invest like the stock market's always going to go up. You got to account for volatility.
Right.
And some of the noise like this is going to create that kind of volatility. But how you almost have to look at debt is like the U.S. has already spent this money. And it's like what they're doing is when they talk about cutting things back, it would be the equivalent of me going out and saying, I know I'm $50,000 in debt, and I think I'm going to get rid of my newsletter subscription to Newsmax magazine or Newsweek magazine or
Right.
one of those things.
Yeah.
It's like they're talking about cutting, but we have this huge issue. So, and then kicking a can down the road and not addressing it is not helping us much at all either.
Right. So they have voted to raise the debt limit 86 times already since
They have,
1960. So now let's talk about the possibility of surging borrowing costs because a default could push interest rates even higher,
Right.
drastically affecting the cost of borrowing. So what if I was thinking of making a big purchase this year?
Well, so it depends on the purchase, right? So if you were thinking about, I think I'm going to purchase a house, not only do we have interest rates that have gone way higher than they were a year ago, but now we have layoffs happening. We have Meta, we have Microsoft, Disney just laid off 7,000 people. And so we're going to start seeing some other things trickle down as far as like real estate market. We're going to start, because what happens when you have layoffs, people who have homes can't pay the mortgage anymore. And so it causes this trickle down effect to where everybody thinks the stock market, that must be the only sign. No, the stock market's one thing. And then later on down the road, the stock market's almost leading. And then later on down the road, you have situations like where we have, now where we have layoffs. And then real estate's at the other end. Real estate's not a leading situation at all. And so there's all these things. I would just say right now, maybe just pause a little bit, see how things are. Don't lock in interest rates at 7, 8% or credit card purchases at 25% just because you want to get something. Right. Be smart about it, at least in the short term. Don't have instant gratification, have delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if the government defaults on debt, there could be a lapse in the $90 billion monthly Social Security payments made to 65 million people. How does somebody even prepare for something like that?
Well, so this is where you need to have a good cash stash for whatever reason. Now, we think cash stash or emergency funds, some people will say, well, how much should I have? And I tell people 9 to 12 months of emergency money built up. Usually we think about that we need that maybe for medical expenses or those unknowns like an air conditioning unit going out is why we have to have that. But it can also be for situations like this where maybe the government says we can't really pay all of the Social Security this month, and so you're going to have to wait. You don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. So have a cash stash that can help get you by. But don't just think about it for what's happening right now. I mean, debt ceiling and all that talk is right now stuff. But don't forget that the government's already telling us that come 2030, in the 2030s, that they're only going to be able to pay 78 cents on the dollar for what they've already told us we can get from Social Security. So what that means is we need to start now creating private pension plans. So if you think about a pension brings in income. You get that from a company. Well, if that's not enough income and the government cuts Social Security, you need to be able to have your own, basically like multiple streams of income that you can kick on in the future to help offset what the government cuts, because that's a likely chance is that they will cut benefits at some point in the future. And like they're saying, likely in the 2030s. Right.
I do think that is probably extremely likely. And just to remind everybody who's watching, this whole conversation is predicated on a possible default, which sounds scary. And again, if people aren't getting those Social Security payments, then they're not spending their money. And if that happened, that would have a huge ripple effect on the economy and could exacerbate any U.S. recession, right?
Well, and we're getting into a political, it's presidential election is right around the corner. Who wants to be left holding that bag? You don't want to be the party that did this because the other party is going to destroy you.
Right.
And so there's a lot of grandstanding that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of people that are trying to figure out, it's not going to be black and white. There's going to be a lot of gray, as it is with everything political. But you can bet that they're going to come to some agreement, and both sides are going to take credit for it to make themselves look good. But in essence, what's really going to happen is I believe the can is just going to end up getting kicked down the road further and further and further. And sometime in the future, we're going to have to answer for that.
Mm-hmm. Whew. Well, I really enjoy when we can kind of do a deeper dive on these headlines because it's great, again, to put everything in context. But Nick, if somebody is kind of feeling anxious about everything they're hearing and they'd like to talk to you more about other income streams, what's the best way to reach you?
So the best way is people can go to our website, group10financial.com. There's lots of information on there. You can set up a 15-minute private consultation or a 15-minute strategy session right there. Our virtual web link is right there. You can also give us a call at 844-GROUP10 just to hash out some questions, because that's what we're getting a lot of is people saying, I know this is happening, but is my money at risk if there is a default, if they can't come to a conclusion on this? And that's what our team does best, is really figuring out how we can get to and through retirement through both good times and sour times.
Exactly. All right, Nick, thank you very much.
Aaron, great being with you.